It's a good idea to either have it on a speakerphone at all times, and actually in the car when people are talking. It's a good thing now they passed that law, because the hands-free thing, when you have, you can't have the phone by your head. But if you're walking around and talking on a cell phone, at least keep it a minimum, he said in this newsletter, about 3 inches away. I was hoping to get Dr. Harvest. She's going to be down in San Diego this December, maybe, to give a talk up here. She's not sure if she's going to make that. But, I mean, she's done this research all over the world, and if you type in who's who in environmental science and type in Magda Havas, you'll find her name in there. And without a doubt, I mean, this is so bad. And then the other thing that's coming up here is Wi-Fi.
It breaks up the DNA strand.
Well, that's what they found out when they examined the blood of these young people. They saw that the DNA has been damaged by the cell phone towers. Now, they were real close. Now, if you want to find, there's nothing you can do about this. If you're curious, you can actually go on, I forgot the name of the site, but you can go on Google and put down cell phone tower locations in your area. And some of you may be really surprised to see how things are surrounding your place. And he suggests in here, get a meter. But something, the meter's not good. That's all it's going to do is freak you out, because you really can't do much about it. I mean, what they do in some of these other countries, it's very expensive to do. I had a doctor friend of mine in Southern California. He's very sensitive to it. He had to really shield his house. It's very expensive. You have to have a lot of money to protect yourself. But in the meantime, the best way to protect yourself is to have a very strong immune system. Because if your immune system is operating functionally and you're not stressed out, you have a good probability that you won't be damaged, as long as you don't attach the cell phone to your head and you're not near cell phone towers. By the way, how many people got Rowan's newsletter? Yeah, so you all saw that article in there, but the researchers. Professor Harvest sends me articles every few days from around the world about what they're really finding out about what damage this does to human beings.
Does he have a website, Stan?
Professor Harvest's website. Yeah. She probably does. She just sends me all the.
How do you spell it? Maybe we could look at this.
Havas. The first name is M-A-G, Magda Havas.
Yeah. H-A-V-I-S, right?
Right. And I think some of you listen to her up in the sample. H-A-V-A-S.
H-A-V-A-S.
Yeah. So I want you to be aware of it. Don't wear those things in your hair. It looks alien anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, watch out.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because as I talk later today, I have a whole section in my presentation on the effects of EMS on hormones. And it's something I've been researching and writing about for 4 years. So we're going to segue this evening into what you're saying, because you are absolutely right, and we have to wake up. This is an environmental disaster.
Good. That was Shel Sermon, our main speaker tonight. Michelle.
Someone a while back had mentioned, I might have been Dave Asprey, ferrite ring that you can get at Radio Shack, ferrite ring to put on the cell phone.
It's a ferret, yeah.
Ferrite ring.
What is it, Dave?
It's like a magnet.
Like the animal?
Realistic.
It sounds more like Dave Yost would say that than I would. I've tried the various thingamajiggies, but I think they're all BS because my signal strength meter doesn't change.
Oh, really?
So I
None
haven't
of them really work. There's a scientific study just came out that none of those devices you put on the cell phone does not do anything to the radiation. It's the ionization problem that is now the big problem. It causes major free radical damage. And the biggest one is the thyroid. That's the number one, not the immune system as much as the thyroid. That's why you have hormonal problems now, especially with women who sit in front of even computers now.
Yeah, okay. Let me get another review.
Hi everybody, my name is Beverly. You probably know about Dr. Mercola.com. He's got a thing that you're supposed to help. But I don't know. I don't know anything about it, but I do know my landlord just agreed to come up with $350
to spend on these magnets that a friend of mine sells and that they use on their property, not only for repelling all of the cell phone radiation, but any kind of radiation. I mean, like from the chemtrails and all that kind of stuff. So if anybody's...
It won't work.
Okay.
I just met with Dr. Hans Schindler out of Austria, and what's his name, Tom over there will tell you. They did studies in Israel, and they've used every kind of component. Nothing removes the ionization factor. It goes through buildings, steel, everything. We tried magnets, we did everything. Nothing really
It's
blocks it.
not for those, it's not for the waves,
Okay,
it's for the
well, I'll
bottom.
tell you what.
It's the
Keep
ionization,
your eyes
it's the
open.
noise.
I actually know both of those little things.
The Mercola device, they call that a blue tube headset, which is kind of clever marketing. All it is it's the end of the little headset that plugs into your phone, terminates, and then there you go, there's one right here. It's got a blue thing where air transfers. That'll help a little bit because you got physical separation between your head, your cranium, and the antenna that's formed by the wire that runs up to the base of the blue part on that thing.
Right.
The other thing that you mentioned was actually they call them cloud busters. It's based on some kind of stuff.
I think this is unique.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the guy's name.
Wilhelm Reich.
I think it's the Reich thing, if I remember right.
Wilhelm Reich.
Yeah, Wilhelm Reich, thank you. Yeah, not Wilhelm Reich, Wilhelm Reich. So the cloud, the chemtrail thing, the things that are supposed to repel those, generally are advertised based on that stuff. Who knows about that? I haven't seen any compelling research. The final thing, Claris makes a clock radio that puts out a pretty strong Schumann resonance, 10.8 something hertz, which
7.8.
7.8? Did it move?
7.8 is Schumann, yeah. And then
7.83. Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
7.83. I'm doing alpha waves, not Schumann. I truly apologize. Anyhow, they sell these clock radios that put out that pulse so your body can synchronize with that instead of all the random cell and Wi-Fi stuff. I think that might work. I've got one in my house, the one that's for a big house, even though it's a small house. And I don't know, maybe it works.
How do you spell that?
Clarus. Could be a bunch of witchcraft. I don't know. It was $300. Figured it was a good gamble.
Very good, very good, very good. Hey, well, you know, as usual, this is such a terrific group. You know, it's group mind, you know, and group memory. You know, and you know, collectively, it's amazing how much we know. So, but you know, unfortunately, this is something that we're still emerging, still evolving, right? So eventually, we'll get it nailed. But you know, as far as I know, what we've just gone through is about as much as is known to date. Keep yourself on alert though, because if you see something really strong on this, we need to hear about it. Okay, what's another topic? Adrian.
I'd like to know what anybody knows about cavitation and bone loss in the jaw, holes in the jaw.
Mm-hmm.
How do you build it up?
Okay, anybody on that?
Tim knows a lot about that, Gallagher.
Yeah.
That's what he does.
And I have some excellent books on the subject as to what the risks are, but how you repair the damage, that I don't know. If you give me a call, I can tell you what the books are that I have on my shelf. Tom Levy is very much into the problems with dentistry, and I've got a little collection of 3 or 4 books on that. And I unfortunately,
So you can go to tomlevymd.com.
yeah, is that it? Tom Levy?
Website.
Isn't it Dr. Levy or?
No, it's Tom Levy.
Tom Levy,
L-E-V-Y.
Yeah, and you might find it. Tom Levy, L-E-V-Y.
MD.com.
MD, okay, good.
There's another one called by Susan Stockton. I don't remember the name, but and also by Bob Dowling. The name of the book is Am I Dead or Alive? It's about the cavitations. Yeah, it's scary.
And you know, as someone said, Tim Gallagher in Sunnyvale is a former board member and world-class dentist, and you know, he's really up on this kind of stuff. And also, I would make an appointment, come down. I know it's a long way for you, but
No, Tim's my dentist.
oh, good, okay.
It's just that this is apparently fairly prevalent, and I'm trying to tie it into other things.
Sure.
People walk around not even knowing what's going on.
Yeah. Well, you know, the root canals are a big problem, and you know, there's a whole range of problems in dentistry which, you know, we never hear about, just as there's a range of problems with the mainstream medicine we never hear about. It's the same sort of thing. Mercury, of course, is probably the #1 catastrophe. And if you want to get your mercury out of your teeth, Tim is a great one to do it. He took mine out when I had a few bucks. Thank God before the market crashed, I had that done. That makes you think I had a lot of money in the market, right?
I just want to remind people that we're videotaping, so if you have a cell phone, please turn it off. Not the ringer off. Turn the cell phone off, because when we have mics up there and here, we get a across through the thing. And this will be my 85th health video that I've done for the Smart Life Forum. Thank you very much. And thank you very much. And last month was Mike Nichols' presentation, but I back-to-back have the Biobank stem cell therapy thing, so you get 2 DVDs for the price of one, $15. And make sure you don't leave here without a list next to the DVDs down there of the wonderful videos that are as fresh and alive today as they were when they were done 7 or 8 years ago, including the great Clara Felix. So thank you.
Okay, we got to move on here and get to we have an extremely good program tonight, starting out with Dave Asprey, talking about fungal problems and health. There we're talking about a new theory, a new treatment, what's new again. And then we'll have Cheryl talking about women's health, especially hormone replacement and hormone health. And the ideas have been around for a while, but the thing is to put it together to make sense of it. And Cheryl is so good when she gave a short report a few months ago, so we got to have this one back, and so we got her back, and very glad. Thank you for coming, Cheryl. So we want to get started now. Now we have one small problem here. Don Southern, you know, who's the expert at introducing the short speaker, usually wings it, was unable to make contact with Dave and find out what his background is. He's got a very distinguished background, and he's still a very distinguished fellow. Unfortunately, he's going to wing it totally, but you know, only Don can pull this off.
No, I can't. What? Dave, why don't you handle it, Phil? Just introduce Dave, because he has a lot going, and unfortunately, I missed contact with him.
Okay, well, you know, all I know is he's a kind of corporate whiz kid, and no, he won't. He's too modest. He's too modest. No, well, you can try, give it a shot.
Give it a try. Hi, I'm Phil Jacklin. So, my name is Dave Asprey. I just quit my job, so I'm actually unemployed, but other than that, I'm like a corporate whiz kid. I was last a VP of marketing, before that a CTO, so I'm sort of the software and internet large infrastructure kind of guy. Interestingly, the skills that we use to figure out why something breaks on a complex system like the internet are awfully similar to the troubleshooting things that you use when you're trying to figure out what's wrong with your body. So I put together a presentation tonight. By the way, I'm on the board. I've been working with Smart Life or attending for, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years, something like that. Sound about right?
Yeah.
So I put together a short presentation tonight, and I think I have a half hour. Are we still doing okay on time?
Yeah, we'll take a break at about 8.
About 8? Excellent.
Hold the mic a little closer to your mouth.
Thanks. I'm going to try and keep the presentation about 20 minutes. We have 10 minutes for Q&A, but it may run over or under. Ask questions during the presentation. I won't be nervous, I promise. So, mycotoxins are the topic. First thing some of you will be asking is, what is a mycotoxin? All right, I'll swallow the mic. Can you hear me now? So, first of all, I'm going to tell you guys, and kind of briefly, why I care. Like, this is a topic of very personal interest to me. And then I'll go through, basically, where you could be exposed to these things, what they could do. I can feel my DNA, it's itching.
That goes off in presentation.
Do you want to borrow my Bluetooth headset, or? So we're going to talk about basically what these things are, how amazingly prevalent they are, and by the way, if I'm still not swallowing the mic, keep making little gestures, and I'll figure this mic out soon enough. And finally, there are some interesting links between mold toxins and all sorts of very, very prevalent health problems, including some of the hormonal things that I think you'll hear about later today. So, without a lot of further ado, I'll tell you one of the reasons I care. It's hard to read any doctor's handwriting. This says, increased risk for stroke or MI, heart attack. I was 31, and my blood was incredibly sticky, and 10 seconds after it was out, it was a solid hunk of crud. My brain wasn't working. This is a $3,000 SPECT scan showing that, oh, my left and right blah blah blahs weren't working. Decreased activity in these other blah blah blahs. Not that I don't know what those are, but that I'm not going to read it to you because you can all read it. But bottom line is, I was getting some pretty annoying things. And worst of all, I got these words. Interesting referral. This is not good when you're 31. It's not good when you're 81. It's not like I didn't have problems before. This is 1995. That is me in a magazine. Recognize any similarities? No. Me either. But truly, that's me. So I've been pretty much puffy and inflamed, and I was pretty much obese till my mid-20s. I used to weigh 300 pounds. I weigh about 205 now, maybe 210, depends on if I did yoga for the last week or not. Thanks. So I've been working on troubleshooting for a while, and the troubleshooting was, well, about this kind of stuff. So basically, I might have a stroke, brain doesn't work, I'm old, and it's pissing me off. Just lack of a better word. I mean, I fired my doctor years ago, like 8 years ago. I went to the Alto Medical Foundation. The guy says, you have to stop taking your 3 grams of vitamin C a day. It might kill you. Oh. His name was Dr. Maxa. And I said, but what about Linus Pauling? And he said, Linus who? This is a true story. And I said, you're fired. And I never saw another doctor for 3 years. And when I came back, I walked in and I said, here's a list of 7 things I might have in the tests from which labs. I need you to sign here and sign here and sign here. Fortunately, it was a good doctor. Dr. Christine Green. She helped me understand some of the things. But this is a background for why do I care about all this stuff? Why am I presenting tonight? Well, I've lived in a couple houses that had leaky water problems. That actually isn't a picture of the mold from my house because I didn't know it was relevant or I would have taken a picture. I just sort of replaced the wallboard and said, I don't know what that stuff is, but I think I'll just be sick. But I had all the symptoms of someone who'd been exposed to toxic mold. Later in 2003, with the help of Tim Guilford, these are my test results. You probably can't read all of these things from back there, but the common toxic molds start here underneath cockroach mix, where I'm not that allergic even though they're highly allergenic. And I'm like over 300 when I should be around 18 or something. So bottom line is going all the way down here to these ones, off the charts allergic, which shows pretty much that not only do I think I've been exposed to toxic molds, I've been exposed because I have a very strong immune reaction to them. So now, I'm a canary. And I really don't like that. I was traveling on business in England about 3 months ago. I went into the underground, the tube, where they have that cool song that says "Mind to the Gap," and so you can step over the little thing. I walked down a long hallway, done in tile, you know how subways are, and I said, I smell mold. And by the end of the thing, I was literally hallucinating, to the point I was seeing shapes and colors, because I'm so allergic to some of these things. Like I spend the rest of the day kind of sitting in a park in a daze, because I'm really strongly affected by molds. Which means I can tell if I walk into a rental unit or a house, give me 5 minutes, I know if it's got mold growing, because it knocks me out. And that's really inconvenient. But it gives me visibility into things that I might not have seen otherwise. So, after having done some research, by the way, this is a very important slide, but before we get to this slide even, I want to show something to you. I'll set the mic down for a second. So this is the physical research that wasn't on the internet, just in terms of where this stuff comes from. So I'm going to set these up here. Please don't steal them. But basically, there's a whole lot of reading material here. I read 90% of it, and I skimmed the rest. So this is a 15-minute short report, but I'm sort of saying here is that I believe it's credible, because, well, these guys sort of all agreed for the most part with the types of things I'm saying in here. So I don't cite every reference I have in here, partly because I did this on an airplane when I couldn't carry those, but What I can say is that the facts all do seem to match here, and I can point you to places if you have specific questions. I can tell you where the data comes from or where to find more data. So this is an amazing slide right here. Mold toxins cause atherosclerosis. There's a great quote from the guy who wrote this book. His name is Avi Costantini, based in Germany. He's an MD. One of the quotes in here is, there is a known cause of atherosclerosis, and it is mycotoxins, flat out. He works for the World Health Organization. Spent 18 years doing this on his own nickel because he wasn't getting support from the larger government money type of things. Pretty interesting read, that book. He's the one who did the 900 references, not me. But I can tell you that there are some very interesting facts here, like, pardon me for reading a little bit, Fusarium. The type of mold that Fusarium creates fusaricin, which is a toxin. It's very common in things like corn. In fact, it's almost universally present in corn and coffee and chocolate and bananas and all the good stuff, unfortunately. Not all of it, so there's some other ones present in the other good stuff. But bottom line is, that stuff, it induced hyperlipidemia and related blood lipid findings, just like human atherosclerosis in both rats and primate studies. Let's see, I have a whole bunch of references here. I'm not going to read through them all. But another one here, baker's yeast fed to rats caused atherosclerotic-like morphology. I can't even read from this angle. Call it, caused changes in the aorta that did not depend on the amount of yeast fed to the animals. In other words, they get a little bit of yeast, it causes a change in their aortas. So there's overwhelming evidence in these books that says we're all subject to the same sorts of things.
What is atherosclerosis?
Hardened arteries, artery disease. Any doctor want to give a better definition than that? Inflammation of the inner lining and then calcification, basically. This was also something that really threw me for a loop when I read the theory, but then I read the couple dozen studies that backed up this kind of radical idea. This is an idea that says the reason that our cholesterol goes up is because our body is fighting off mycotoxins. Cholesterol, it can be a first line of defense in the blood to bind these toxins. I'm seeing some nodding heads out here. This is really cool. So, it's very interesting. I think the next slide has the other data point for this. Those statin drugs that lower cholesterol, you ever heard of nystatin? Nystatin is a common antifungal. It was the first statin, at least according to somewhere or another that I read. The other statin drugs that are out there are all antifungal drugs that, for some reason, lower cholesterol. And the mechanism of action isn't that well understood yet, except that we know that cholesterol goes up. And we know that very, very well from what all the ranchers and animal farmers and people have done. So we know, you give an animal moldy stuff, there's about 200 bad kinds of mold and about 200,000 non-bad kinds of mold. You give them the wrong kind of mold, their cholesterol goes up. You give them an antifungal, it goes down. Interestingly enough, every chemotherapy drug that this guy listed, and there might be others that I don't know about, also has antifungal effects. And there's an entire book in this stack here about just breast cancer and mycotoxins, making a very strong case that it can be both the toxins from mold or it can actually be a fungal infection that looks like a cancer, because it turns out that fungal cells are much harder to differentiate from human cells than, say, a bacteria would be. So these fungal infections, especially like subacute, low-grade fungal infections, are extremely common, according to a lot of the stuff I've read, and I know that I struggled with problems with that for years. Just like other people who lived in houses with toxic mold, it messes with your immune system, and after that, you get candida, you get weird little things. Other references that I've got in this stack somewhere or another. Different funguses growing in the body, or the mycotoxins, can actually change sex hormones. And when I say that, I don't mean, I'm using a general word here, but with a little bit of page flipping, I could actually tell you which fungus changes which form of estrogen into which less desirable form of estrogen. Like, we know that if you have the wrong thing in your body, that it can take a hormone and do something bad to it that your body doesn't need it to do. All of us have too much estrogen today, according to at least the most likely statistics. I may not, but then again, I'm on estrogen blockers and I take testosterone. But unless you're doing something radical, the odds are that you probably have too much because of plastic, because of soy, because of all the other pollution type things, insecticides, pesticides. But we don't need a fungus growing in our bodies that does the same sort of thing. Was that a question or a no? Okay.
What estrogen blocker do you take?
Which estrogen blocker do I take is the question. I take Arimidex and Clomid. And I believe it's Arimidex is the aromatase inhibitor. We do happen to have a guy on our advisory board, our medical advisory board. Is he here, Dr. Miller?
No, he's not.
He's not here, too bad. He's a very, very renowned guy in that sort of stuff, so he could do the testing and he can prescribe the things that would be appropriate for you. Not everyone needs the blocker, some people just need the cream. It's very individualized and sort of customized. You need to monitor the levels if you're going to do that kind of thing. Thyroid levels. Also, oh sorry, another question?
On the Arimidex, is the purpose to lower the estrogens?
So the Arimidex is a bit of a misnomer compared to the mycotoxin thing. What Arimidex does is it prevents testosterone from converting into estrogen. It turns out that when I did my hormone levels when I was about 30, that I had far more estrogen than I should have had because I used to be obese. And I didn't have enough testosterone because my testosterone very quickly converted through aromatase into estrogen. So what we did is we basically blocked some of the aromatase using a very tiny amount of Arimidex. And what that means is that now I have more normal hormone levels for a guy my age.
Would it make a difference if the hormones that were blocked were the bad 16s becoming the good 2s instead of blocking your estrogen completely?
So there's a question there about hormonal treatments that is way over my head. But I can tell you that from the perspective of talking about the fungal stuff and mycotoxins, if your hormones are way out of whack, your immune system is probably going to be unable to deal with recovering from a mycotoxin exposure. So I consider proper hormonal measurement and treatment, if necessary, to be really, really important if you want to get better after you've lived in several moldy houses like I have. Or if you have Lyme disease like I do.
Aflatoxin causes liver cancer. Do other toxins also cause liver cancer?
Great question. Aflatoxin, the most famed mycotoxin of all, causes liver cancer. And we pretty much know that. We even had a book, the China study, that talked about that quite a bit here. Yes, many other mold toxins do cause cancer, both of the liver, pancreas, and throughout the body. The interesting thing is that aflatoxin, because it's relatively well understood, is measured for in the US in some products, not others. I still wouldn't eat peanut butter in this country, especially the mass-produced stuff. But then again, I wouldn't eat any peanut butter, so maybe I'm picky. But overall, that's less of a risk than it used to be. But the other ones, particularly the Fusarium strains that we don't measure, are pretty scary from a cancer perspective. We're talking about thyroid. There are also several case studies, as well as a couple like in vitro kinds of tests that were done on animals going back to about 1970 something that talk about the role of specific types of fungus in modifying thyroid levels and how mycotoxin exposure moves thyroid down or up. That's also pretty well known by people who raise animals because, well, they're interested in the weight of the animals. It's amazing what happens when you have control of 100,000 animals and you can make them eat exactly what you want and measure whatever you want, and when you think you might be doing something right, you can just kill one and look inside it. Doctors don't get to do that, but ranchers do, and they know stuff that we don't know, and it's pretty darn interesting when you dig into it. Also, pancreatic function. Specific mycotoxins, specific funguses going after the islet cells within, the ones that make insulin within the pancreas. That's also a documented medical fact.
So which ones are they?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
Well,
I can tell you that probably within 10 minutes after finishing my presentation. It's in this book, which I stupidly didn't bring with me to Las Vegas for the trade show where I was this morning. So I'll have to look that one up for you, but I've got the page mark. Interestingly, talking about animals, we sequester mycotoxins in fat, then we eat it. That is why I only eat grass-fed meat, because molds usually don't grow on grass, except New Zealand grass, sometimes there's a little bit of mold, but it's usually not enough, at least not enough to set off my canary senses. They have like Spider-Man, I'm Canary Man, just not as tough. So, one of the things I came across in my research, how do people who raise animals for money, how do they know if they have moldy feet? Aside from ELISA testing and all of the incredible number and rich, diverse array of products available to ranchers to test the food before they give it to their cows, because they need to know, because it affects their profit margins. But once you sell it to people, it's okay. Well, this is from one of the companies that makes a product called Mycosorb, which is a mixture of 3 or 4 different mycotoxin adsorbents. It's a little small up here. Let me just pick out some select ones. They're saying, you know, if you're having this stuff happen, problems here, oh, aflatoxin in the milk, yeah, the food's probably bad. They stop eating. Their milk is no good. They get cysts in their ovaries. That's not a problem in people, is it? Oh. Stillbirths? Vaginal problems? Estrous cycle irregularities? These are problems that people are having in rampant numbers, and we know that if we give moldy feed to our animals, they get them, but we don't look at whether the moldy feed these animals ate is transferring its toxins to us. And I'll tell you, it is, because when I eat a steak at a $50 steakhouse, I feel like crap. And when I eat a steak that's grass-fed at home, I feel just fine, and the difference is what the animal ate. Oh, I forgot the juicy bits. Vomitoxin. Feed rejection is the technical term, but cows can throw up apparently. I don't know which stomach it comes from, but I don't want to. Let's see, basically more, vomitoxin is also responsible for the ovary problems. Zearalenone, which is a particularly nasty one, also present a lot in corn. Prolapse, embryo mortality, vulvovaginitis. In fact, I believe that a huge amount of fertility problems that are happening with people, especially in developed nations, are a direct result of mycotoxin exposure from the environment, and particularly from the food supply. But hey, I can be radical. So let's look at the pig. A little bit of a better model than a cow. They only have one stomach. Fumonisin, the one I mentioned in corn, acute lung edema. Anyone say asthma? It goes on and on. Hepatitis, intestinal hemorrhaging. There's lots of links between IBD and bowel disease and Crohn's disease and things like that, and molds and mycotoxins. Kind of a long list here. I'm not going to read the whole list to you. But these are other things that are implicated with more than just one little report, like implicated with a stack of reports with mycotoxins. Of these things, haven't had the first two. However, I'll tell you, my ex-wife, who lived with me in one of those moldy houses, did have a miscarriage. Headaches, memory loss, destruction of brain tissue. Apparently I've had all those. That's scalloping in the brain. Thank goodness I had extra. Just kidding. Cancer, fingers crossed, don't think I've got that. Allergic reactions, pick something. Yeah, I'm allergic to it. I used to get open skin sores, skin rashes, all that stuff, quite a lot. I don't anymore, unless I'm exposed. Chronic sinusitis was a problem for almost 20 years for me. Serious issue, directly tied to moldy environments. Asthma, had that when I was a kid. By the way, when I was a kid, I lived in a basement that had been flooded and never remediated. But hey, we didn't know any better. So, I'm hoping by now that you're going, I probably don't want to be near these things. So I'm going to tell you, where do they live? There's kind of three things. There's moldy places. It's environmental exposure. There's moldy bodies. This is where things like candida or other funguses grow, either in our GI tract, in our skin, in our sinuses, or elsewhere, either in our organs or between our organs. And moldy food. Getting rid of moldy places is easy. Now, if anyone's ever had toxic mold, they'd probably want to throw something moldy at me for saying that, because it's actually not that easy. But compared to getting it out of your body or out of the food supply, fixing a house is easy because, well, at the end of the day, you can always just light it on fire. That'll take care of the problem. You can't light the food supply on fire, and you can't light yourself on fire. Therefore, this is an easy problem. About 2.5 years ago, Place I live, 2 blocks from here in Palo Alto, had a leaky dishwasher. Didn't know it for 2 years. Swapped out the dishwasher. The day that the new one went in, I got really sick. Complete swelling. I mean, I'm looking pretty good right now because I'm doing the right things inflammation-wise. Literally, in one day, I had a spare tire this big just from swelling that happened as a result of the mold. So we hired American Air Testing to come out, and they said, oh look, you've got aspergillus growing, and it's actually pretty darn strong. Even my dogs were losing weight, they wouldn't eat. So we ended up having to put a $15,000 new kitchen in the place. We had guys in spacesuits clean the entire house, HEPA filtering, all the kinds of stuff that's kind of described down here. Basically mold remediation, and we were lucky it was only $15,000 because it was in one location. But I was sick for 3 months from that, and my wife, who isn't particularly, or at least wasn't particularly sensitive to that stuff, became sensitive to it through exposure. She happens to run a medical diagnostic lab company, and just for kicks, we sent our blood off to her lab to see what we were allergic to. And lo and behold, the allergic responsiveness to the specific mold in our house was through the roof, off the charts. That's the kind of thing that doesn't exist for most of the mold lawsuits out there. That kind of data just isn't present. Yet another friend of mine sued the builder of her home for causing autism in her son. This is the first lawsuit ever to be won where cause was admitted by a court. She was already a multimillionaire. She just did it because she wanted the court to say that that's what caused her son's problems. And they did. That was in Huntington Beach. So, depending on what's growing, if it's growing in the environment where you are, if you have Stachybotrys, you basically leave everything. If it's not made out of porcelain or something non-porous, you get rid of it because it's ruined. This is ruined by being. What Stachybotrys does is for every spore that gets put out by a fruiting body, these little things, there's 300 small particles that contain the really bad toxins that go out. So there's a 300-to-1 ratio. And it's not like it's meant to be evil. All it is it's saying, well, whatever this dead thing is I'm eating, I don't want some other bacteria or some other fungus to eat it first, so I'm just going to get a big circle of toxic space around it so I can take my time munching it. Very evolutionarily elegant, but unfortunately those little particles really mess us up. That's the worst mold of all.
Is there an air test instrument?
Yes. What American Air Testing does is they test 50 liters of air. They pull it through a very fine filter. Then they look for particulate matter, and then they culture it to see what's growing. And they do some sort of a test after it's grown to tell you what strain it is. That might be PCR, I'm not sure.
So you have to hire them?
Yeah, they cost about between $300 and up, depending on how many places in your house. What they do is one measurement in the house, or usually several, and one outside to compare whether the inside level is higher than outside. And if so, they'll give you a recommendation. It's not a big deal. You have something that's not very harmful, dry up the floor, or you need to work on this.
Actually, I found that air testing for mold is super inadequate. And I actually had somebody who came in and did a $700 air testing thing not charge me because I came back with a bunch of petri dish samples that showed there was tons of mold there that they simply didn't catch.
Very interesting. That's a really good point in case you didn't hear it. She actually had someone come back after doing an air test and give her money back because the air test didn't pick up mold that she was able to pick up in petri dishes. It turns out that someone who's good at air testing will bang on the pipes, so to speak, the ductwork, and basically stir up mold if it's present. But there is definitely a place for petri dishes, or they call strip testing. You take a piece of Scotch tape and test it if you can find the visible mold. I never saw any mold in Palo Alto. I never even smelled it until after several days of it being really hot. It just made everyone sick very quickly. We were fortunate we figured out what it was. If I hadn't been exposed before, we wouldn't have known.
What do you think of the aggregate issues for growing culture?
To be honest, I'm not enough of an expert in testing an environment for that. I pretty much outsource that. I can tell you that John and Laura Riera at American Air Testing have at their disposal all of the methods that are available, and they tend to pick the right ones. They've tested actually another house where we almost moved, and we'd actually already signed the lease and said maybe we should just check because then I'm not so sure about this one room. And sure enough, they went in and they said, "Yep, you've got 4 of the the 200 toxic kind is growing at non-trivial levels in the walls. It's all painted in right now, but enough of it's coming through. You probably don't want to move there because you're allergic. Someone who isn't allergic and doesn't have kids could probably be healthy there. This was in Los Altos Hills. It was a nice place. Is that a question or a 5-minute time?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Richard Moffat used to come to our group here as a chiropractor, but treats people for cancer, mold sensitivities, and so forth. And he said, you know that fat tire that so many people have? I said, yeah. I said, you know, that's mycotoxins often. I said, really? I said, well, how do you treat mycotoxins? He says, cream of tartar. Yeah. Cream of tartar apparently affects it in some way. I don't know, but he said it works.
Well, if you didn't hear that,
that's a new thing.
The guy was a chiropractor? Or
chiropractor by training, but he treats cancer patients for low-income areas in
got it. So we'll call him an alternative medicine expert, a credentialed alternative medicine expert, who's using cream of tartar to bind mycotoxins. That's not one I've come across. I have seen on several mold books tell us not to have cream of tartar. So because the basic tartrate can do something funky with your kidneys, if I remember right, but it looks like Bernd had a thought there.
One of the best ways to treat mold is take hydrogen peroxide and white vinegar and bind them together and then spray it and take it internally, and you can knock it out right away.
Hydrogen peroxide and white vinegar, that is a good treatment. By the way, the traditional treatment that most people have thought of for mold, which is bleach, it doesn't work in houses. It actually adds water, and then the hypochlorite goes away, and the mold gets worse. So the concoction that I use on pretty much everything after I buy it at the farmer's market is vodka, whatever's cheapest, mixed with grapefruit seed extract. You shake it up, put it in one of those pressurized misters. You can spray that on fruit, it just won't mold for a long time.
Wow. That's a good one.
Grapefruit seed extract. You can buy it at Whole Foods.
You get a citrocil. It's a little humidifier kind of thing. You can, and it puts out grapefruit seed, and you put it on the room where you want it to, and it slowly does it all 24 hours a day.
Yeah, basically a humidifier with GSE inside it.
It's a special humidifier. It's
okay, for
developed by
GSE.
a company, yeah, just for this.
You all the stuff on your website there?
No.
Put it on your website.
All right, I'll get right on it.
Epidemiologists use a thing called Rodat plates. They can go around, just put them on the wall, and then they can send these plates to a lab to be analyzed.
Are these basically the sticky ones?
Yeah.
Yep, so the poor man's version of that is Scotch tape. And you can, there are actually companies now where you can send you a Scotch tape sample in and they'll tell you what mold is on it. But I think the epidemiology approach probably is a little bit more repeatable and scientific, and the adhesives might be a little more evenly applied and all. But in terms of saying, is something present and is there a lot or a little, I think that strip testing is probably better than nothing, but you can spend a lot of money on mold testing if you're not careful. I know I did, but it was worth it. Then again, I'm a canary.
What don't you eat there?
Oh, we'll get there. Bluetooth headsets for one thing.
What was the HEPA vacuum that you had?
HEPA vacuum, you can buy them. My wife swears, she's from Sweden, so she swears by a brand called Miele, which is apparently super pricey. I see like a lot of women going, yeah, that's a good one.
It's a good one.
So basically, pretty much most $300 vacuum cleaners offer that as an option. What it means is that it takes out particles of a certain size, which will get rid of the vast majority of spores. So when you vacuum something up, you don't just circulate the spores back around in the house.
So is the Dyson not good for
The Dyson? I don't know if it has a HEPA filter or better. So let's talk about getting mold out of our bodies. And I say sort of hard. Oh yeah, I'm running over in time a little bit. All right, I'm going to speed up a bit here. Slow down on the questions. So, moldy bodies, antifungals. Antifungals, many of them actually come from funguses, so they actually are mycotoxins, just like most antibiotics are, unless they're sulfa-based. But, at least in my experience, I didn't really start getting better until I used nystatin and diflucan. But I had pretty serious stuff going on. And I still swear by those things. If I can feel myself tipping in the wrong direction, a little bit of one of the two of those, depending on what's going on, usually keeps me on track. But I try not to use them because you don't want to use those. They're hard. Well, nystatin's pretty harmless, but diflucan's harder on your liver. Low carb diets, that's obvious. Yeast eats carbs. Nutritional supplements. One of these books, the Costantini one, here, this one. the Garden of Eden diet, which by the way is probably the weakest of his books, but he's got a ton of evidence in here. Unfortunately, way too many recipes, none of which are very attractive, and half of which have margarine. But basically, he'll give you 5 or 6 cases for each of these supplements, the ones that are in most multivitamins, how each of these has a specific antifungal effect that's pretty well documented. If you have a mycotoxin problem, don't add more, which means don't take antibiotics unless you're going to die. I had this last thing happen to me. I actually have active Lyme disease in addition to all this mold exposure, which really sucks because the toxins that mold makes and the toxins that Lyme puts out when it's in your body are very similar. They're called lipophoric. They're recirculated through your bile system, and about 24% of the population is genetically built so they recirculate that bile and they don't excrete those toxins. I'm one of those.
So you know about using what's that old cholesterol drug you use?
Next slide. In fact, do I have it here? Yeah, we'll definitely get down to that. In fact, I thought yeah, I'll get there in a minute.
Cholesterol.
Yeah, cholesterol is the one. The thing I was going to bring up here, the last point, is pretty important. Even if you clear out the mycotoxins that may be, or we'll call it a fungus infection at that point that may be in your body, you can have a sinus thing growing called MARCONS, multiple antibiotic resistant coagulase something, forgot the last couple. Anyway, that is a bacteria that puts out a toxin that will also make you feel like crap. Well, GSE, which kills both bacteria and fungus and a lot of parasites too, great stuff. With iodine and colloidal silver sort of rotated, took care of that. Let's see, where is my cholesterol thing? Oh, that's I have a whole protocol thing. We're getting only 5 minutes over.
Dave,
we'll get to it.
What you just said was very important, that last thing about what took care of that. Would you mind taking 10 seconds and repeat
Sure.
that?
Lugol's iodine, clear, and colloidal silver. Clear is basically, saltwater nasal spray, except it has xylitol in it, and it doesn't have nasty preservatives. They use GSE as the preservative in it. So Ocean, which is the brand a lot of people know about, is actually irritating because the preservative they use dries out your sinuses. Go figure. But clear is just awesome. If you're cheap like me, you also can just mix salt, water, xylitol, and drop a GSE, and you've got clear if you know how to make the right isotonic solution. Lugol's iodine, I think we've talked about in this group quite a lot. A couple drops of that in a neti pot, or there's a yogic thing you do where you bend forward and you snort hot salt water up through your nose out of a bowl. That's actually the best, but, well, it's kind of messy. Colloidal silver, you put a few ounces of that or whatever, mix it in with your clear, and use that. So I do iodine in the morning, clear during the day, silver at night, sort of thing. Quick one, Brad.
Another one I use also, it works pretty good, it's cheap. Get coconut oil and a Q-tip and put it on your nasal and do that 2 to 3 times a day, it clears up the sinuses real well.
So coconut oil on a Q-tip in the sinuses clears it up. I find that really works well at high altitude in the desert too.
Yeah.
Watch out with your coconut oil though. I ran into this not too long ago. It's got to be good quality, stored in the fridge coconut oil. A lot of us have learned, it doesn't oxidize easily, so you can throw it in the cabinet. It does grow mold. In fact, coconut oil is a significant source of mold, especially if it's copra or from dried coconuts. In fact, some of it is so moldy it's gray because of the way it's harvested. You go to buy the Whole Foods chocolate truffles, those things are mycotoxin bombs because they use copra oil. I eat one of those, my hands swell up, my feet swell up, and I walk around like this for a day. Wow. Like just one, but they're really good. All right, so getting mold out of the food is really, really hard. I know I'm running behind on time, so I'm going to go fast. This is my protocol. This is stuff I've learned the hard way. By the way, I'll post this whole presentation online. Just deal with the fact that the meat you eat is grass-fed or wild caught if it's fish. Do not eat farm salmon because it eats corn and soybeans, which is gross. No fish should ever eat a soybean. That's just not right. Eggs are a huge problem. They have cholesterol. Why are eggs supposed to cause heart attacks? Well, if the chicken leg egg ate a lot of mycotoxin-infested stuff, by the way, they do, that's a huge problem in the chicken industry right now. How do we buy the cheapest food that's almost not moldy enough to kill our chickens so they can still lay eggs? That's the ultimate business solution. So I get eggs at the farmer's market from a lady who feeds no corn and no grain. They eat worms and bugs, just like I used to when I was young. No cured meats. There are serious problems with mycotoxins that grow during the curing process. Ham is not good for you. Grass-fed butter. I like organic pastures, but it's only good some of the year, and I order some from some Amish guy online. But you can go to Whole Foods and buy Kerrygold or Anchor brand. They're all grass-fed.
Good.
If it's made out of corn, don't eat it. That one's easy. Popcorn is actually bad because it's dried. I actually eat corn. It's fresh, sweet corn. That stuff isn't moldy. When it dries, it's moldy. This chocolate and coffee one really, really sucks. But I found a way around it. Unfortunately, the guy left. But if you go to a small roaster, a guy who roasts a batch every day or two, and you say, what beans do you have? Can you show me your cleanest bean? They know what that means. A lot of the time, 30% of the beans are damaged, which means that they are damaged, and in the drying process, they are growing mold. If you pick up, say, 3 or 4 of them and break them open, they're blue and green inside. This is before they roast them. So don't buy pre-ground coffee. If you're going to do it, buy the expensive coffee that's the nicest looking bean you can find, and talk to the guy who roasted it, and make sure he picks out the ones that are broken, because any good roaster will tell you those make it taste worse anyway. You'll have the best cup of coffee you ever had, and it won't kill you.
Right. Hey Dave, do you think maybe we could do this in part 2 sometime?
Yeah, I think we might have to. I'm 10 minutes over.
What about blue cheese?
Finish that list.
I'm going to finish the food list. That makes sense. We're only like 3 slides. There's only 2 more slides really of content. So if I can have 5 more minutes, I'm done. Otherwise, I'll stop right now if you tell me to. You might get booed out of the room.
5 minutes.
See, here's the thing. You know, you can skip the break.
You tell me you're going to break. All right, I'll speed it up. So on the chocolate front, here's what I do. I go to the store and I buy the most expensive chocolate bar I can find, like, you know, Uber Gourmet $6 kind of thing, and then I take a bite, and if I don't feel crappy and I don't get dizzy after a while, then I eat the rest of it, and I'm fine. If I feel dizzy, then I throw my $6 candy bar away, because I wouldn't even give it to my friends, because I like my friends. Well, some of them. Only undamaged nuts, stored cold. This is really tough. If they're out of the shell, they start to not only oxidize, but they mold. So you go to their, look at for the, what's the red, somebody's red mill, you know, the kind of expensive grain stuff you can buy at Whole Foods. Bob's Red Mill, thank you. They've got almond meal sitting there, tiny little pieces of almond mixed with air, sitting there not refrigerated. That is a mycotoxin, just major source. I eat that stuff and I'm just down for the count. But if I take my own almonds that have been stored either in the freezer or the fridge, and I grind them myself and I use them, I'm fine. And this is because they've been sitting there. Both the oils are oxidized, but they're growing stuff. You just can't see it yet. If the fruit's damaged, don't eat it. Particularly the black stuff in bananas, that's almost always got fusarium in it. This one is tough for some people. No cheese, no soy sauce, no fermented products. It's also a bit controversial because we all hear fermented products are good for us. They are, if you know what the fermentation microbes were, and you almost never know, unless it was done in, you know, laboratory type conditions, like say some of the supplements we take. You're kind of taking a gamble. Apple cider vinegar appears to be safe, and some people can eat kefir or grass-fed yogurt sorts of products, not me. Processed foods. Let's see, you take 1 million of something and 0.5% of them have mold, and molds are active at parts per billion concentrations. You put them in a giant blender and then you feed them to a lot of people, everybody gets mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are worse when they're blended. You get 3 or 4 of them together in small doses. That's worse than getting just a single one. So processed foods, that Hershey's bar, whatever, just don't do that. It's not good for you. Don't eat a lot of grains. If you're going to, eat the expensive ones and look at them. So I went to Safeway, a place I usually don't shop, but I was in Lake Tahoe and, well, that's all they had. And I bought some brown rice. Rice is one of the safer grains. If you're going to eat a grain, rice is pretty good. But yeah, theirs was cheap. Bought the house brand because it was all they had. And so I looked at it before I cooked it. About 1 in 30 had visible mold on it. So I threw those away and I washed the rest real carefully, threw some GSC in there, crossed my fingers, and I was all right. But sorting out rice grains? Come on. Testing should have caught that, and it would have in Denmark or China, where this was enough of a problem that they put testing in, or Brazil. China and Brazil aren't exactly known for being first world countries, but they have much better regulations about mycotoxins than the US or most of Europe. Beer and wine are not good for you. Despite the wine industry's best, there's lots and lots of evidence that mycotoxins in wine, including alcohol itself, which is a mycotoxin, it's just a cheap one that yeasts make to fight off other things like bacteria that are competing for the same food source. It's not good for you, and there are mycotoxins present, particularly in beer. In order to make beer, they take the grains that they can't make bread out of and they can't feed to animals because they've got too much mold. And then they ferment them. And yes, we have lots of evidence of actual mycotoxins present in final products, so the heating and the fermentation process does not destroy mycotoxins. Don't eat leftovers. It's a tough one. I might violate it every now and then, but I keep my leftovers stored in a vacuum thing. I have one of those little vacuum packer things which reduces mold, or I coat them in that GSE mixture because I really don't like to eat moldy stuff. If it's more than about 24 hours old, it's started to go bad even if you can't taste it yet. And sushi is your friend. When you travel, high-end white rice. They won't use blemished rice because it ruins the look of the stuff. And fish, which mostly is wild caught. Don't eat the salmon. It's usually farmed, unless it was really expensive sushi. Okay, second to the last slide with any content to speak of. This is what I did to get better. This is the meat of the presentation, grass-fed meat. So I sort of level 1 and level 2, which is entirely arbitrary, based on difficulty in obtaining these things. Level 1, activated charcoal is actually a well-known mycotoxin absorber. It's mostly good for aflatoxin, and it's one of the original 2 that have been used in the food industry for 30 plus years. So you can buy this at Whole Foods in the digestive aids section. Whenever I go out to eat, which means I'm probably going to be exposed to mycotoxins from the restaurant's cheap food supply, I take 10 or so of those. And if I'm having symptoms, I take 10 or so of those whenever I think about it all day long until I don't feel symptoms anymore. It helps. It will also, by the way, stop some medications from absorbing. Bentonite clay, pretty much a similar thing. It's also been used as a mycotoxin absorber. This is how to pull them out of your gut, how to pull them out of your body, whether they're being generated by an infection you have, or through the food you ate, or through the air you breathe. This helps you get better. High fiber intake matters every day because all of us are exposed to mycotoxins at some level all the time, and you want to help escort them out, especially if you eat at restaurants. So that means lots and lots of fiber. Eat your veggies, consider psyllium husks, or my theory about why modified citrus pectin is so effective at lowering cholesterol is because, well, citrus pectin absorbs mycotoxins. It's a soluble fiber. Zeolite, which Bernd knows a ton about, is being used just rampantly in the food industry right now because animals who eat zeolite and are given moldy food on purpose because it's cheaper, they don't get sick, or at least as sick. So there are actually equations out there that say if your grain has so many parts per 1,000 even of these nasty toxins in it, this is how much zeolite to add to cancel that out. Whether we really want to eat those animals when they're done, I don't know. But I know that zeolite will help to pull this stuff out. It's powerful stuff, and Bernd sells really good stuff. Polysaccharides, which we've all heard of probably. Remember what was the name? Glucomana? There's a company that was doing $100 million in sales of this product that seemed to make people well, but the FDA shut them down because they couldn't prove it worked. That's why it worked. It was absorbing mycotoxins. There are lots of other polysaccharides that are involved in health processes. And finally, beta-glucan, yeast cell wall extract. You can buy it by the container load to feed to cows. I've called the guys who sell cattle and pig mycotoxin absorbers and said, I'm running a small family farm. I just want 200 pounds. I'm willing to pay cash. Can I get it? The answer was no. Unless you're willing to spend $50,000 and buy a container load, we won't sell it to you.
Wow.
They have beta-glucan. Yeah. But they don't have the ones, there's actually a whole bunch of hacked versions of this that are much better than the straight ones we take. So basically, if you're a mass marketing farm, you can get all of these cool absorbing things. I've talked to the sales reps, and half of them won't even sell in the US because our government is very hostile. They make it in the US and ship it overseas because there's a market for it there. Level 2. I literally talked to one of the guys, and please send it to me, just give me a sample. Just would not do it, and I've emailed a bunch of others. This is where it gets pretty good. We've got cholestyramine, Cholestyramine is a very old anti-cholesterol drug. What it does is it binds to bile in your gut, and then you poop it out. Well, since these toxins are circulated in your bile, you remove the toxins when you do this, which coincidentally might explain why your cholesterol goes down when you take this stuff. It does actually physically bind to cholesterol in the gut as well, but that's not its only mechanism of action. This stuff turned the lights back on for me. The combination of cholestyramine and Actos is incredible. Cholestyramine helps to remove the toxin levels. What Actos does, Actos is a diabetes drug. What it does for people who have been exposed to these kinds of toxins is it turns on the genes that were turned off by the toxins. They actually throw some genetic switches. And if you don't do Actos, most people just take Actos for a week and they flip their genes and they're fine, unless they have a continuous fungal infection or Lyme disease. But with that, it's like all of a sudden you got your life back. And so that's the final trick. A lot of people don't know the Actos followed by the cholestyramine. If you go through a regimen like this, I skipped the other one. This liver flush is just great fun. You can Google for it. I've got a link at the end of the presentation that you'll all be able to get. But this is a thing that takes a day. You drink a half a cup of olive oil and some grapefruit juice, and it's entirely unpleasant, but you actually excrete a ton of cholesterol, hardened cholesterol stuff from your liver. The first time I did this, literally I woke up the next morning, I said, I don't have that feeling like there's a knife between my shoulder blades that I've had for 5 years, like really bad joint pain. It was just gone in one day. And like, okay, I'll drink as much olive oil as you want me to if I could just stop hurting. Cholestyramine kind of has a similar effect, but I think a combination of the two is good. Is our break over?
Yeah. Over by 5 minutes.
All right, so then
Okay, well.
this is the final slide. The results.
Your website.
Ta-da.